Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I just want to talk about the beginnings of this book, The Family Row. Last night I was kind of procrastinating about reading this. I felt like it may be a little bit emotional. I started it and it hasn't really gotten emotional for me yet. I found that at the beginning it's a story that starts off kind of, cozy. It talks about the landscape of Louisiana, and, you can tell that this man, Joshua Prager, is a professional writer. And it starts off with a nice feeling. So that was my impression. And then as you get into it, he talks about slavery. And I think that was on purpose. And he talks about the civil rights movement. And then he goes into about this family and their history in that time period, where usually big families who were poor had to work hard all day. They didn't have much money. They had a hard time putting food on the table, barely had shirts on their back. And this struck me as this sort of bias came into play, I thought, without really looking at other people during that time period who did have a lot of kids and who took care of them well. So we know with the history of Margaret Singer, with this, she felt that children who were just families, mothers who had 9 or 10 kids, it was too hard for them and it was just too much for them, so that children were better off being aborted. And I know that Singer had a very negative view of a life that was hard. But at the same time, what does not come into play here is the joys that a lot of children do have, even with a hard upbringing. My grandmother had 10, and I remember my uncle would always talk about, having fun outside in the projects, playing kick the can, and the stuff that he would do when he was a kid. So a lot of times kids do not know better. They don't really understand the financial dynamics. They don't understand what really is why things are being done. And many times they're brought up with a lot of beliefs that are really, strange, and they don't really make sense. And it comes from the generations before of just being ignorant or whatever. But what happens is when kids grow up, they do get a chance to change. We can blame our parents for all kinds of things and make excuses, but we have the ability to change when we're adults. So even if somebody was grown, was brought up in the projects as my family was, or on a farm where there was a lot of ignorance, you can still change. And that's the exciting thing about when you are older, you have choices. So these people chose to live, or to not necessarily always live a certain way, but to respond a certain way to their circumstances. And this is when abortion comes into play. When we don't have much money, and we definitely have struggled financially, and you're not always going to be financially ready. You're just not. You have to work at it. When you have these struggles, it's really how you respond to it. And when we take abortion and we say, this is going to be hard, we really don't have any money, and you choose to abort, that is definitely a wrong choice. What would be better is to say, like we had no money. It was normal to say, okay, we're going to have a baby and we don't have any money, but we'll figure it out. And when we had our firstborn, I was working and my husband was working, but we, again, didn't have a lot of money, and we did spend money on things that I wouldn't spend money on now. So, just going out a lot when we were dating, to the movies and out to eat and all that stuff, if you can really just, realize that you have choices too, where you spend your money and what you do with it, you're going to be better off. So there's never been a time where we have been really financially well off to say, okay, now we can afford to have a bunch of kids. It's really a process. There's a lot of detail that you can't see. For us, when we were in a trailer with our kids for a long time, we made it work. And it was really a mindset of appreciating what you do have, and not feeling that just because you don't have a lot of money, you shouldn't have kids. Because this changes all the time, your money. I mean, you could have a lot of money and just lose it all, just like that. Or you could have an inheritance, you could have a better position, you could have bad health and lose it all. So finances is never a foundation to build a family on. You want to be able to have children while you can. There's only a certain amount of time that we can have our kids, and later on you can work and bring in even more money. And just looking at different classes I've been taking and videos, midlife is the time where a lot of people in history have really started their careers. Everyone from, just like the guy who bought McDonald's. I think he was in his 50s. The books Little House on the Prairie, the author was older. Some of the actresses in the movies, they were older when they started their career. So as you get older, it's not a time to stop. It's a time to get going and really develop the talents and skills you didn't have time to do when you were raising your kids. And there's nothing wrong with living on bare bones and really giving all that time to your kids. And then as they get older, you have time to do what you want. And if you take life with that perspective, a real slow kind of perspective where you're not going to have a lot. I mean, I know I was somebody who was given a lot when I was growing up by my grandmother, yet in many ways I didn't really have a whole lot in the sense of just like being a really wealthy child, and that's okay. And then as I got older, I had a little bit more and a little bit more until I have quite a bit more now, but I still have room to grow, and I still have room to really get myself going financially and really get wealth. So that's what I'm looking to do now, as my kids are, leaving home, and I'll be an empty nester before you know it. So this is something that we do all of our life. It's not just you have a big chunk of money and now you can have a bunch of kids. It's a slow process of working upward in life and improving yourself with your time, so that when you are able to work, you can really put that money to use and invest it in things. And so I'll be going into this book some more, and what I think I did after getting past that first beginning introduction. This book goes into Norma's life, and she definitely was very promiscuous. She was sleeping with men and women, and with that lifestyle that she chose, I can understand why she felt really burdened with children, because she couldn't do what she wanted. I mean, it talks about how she had her first daughter, and her mother, who also was very promiscuous and a mess, was taking care of her daughter, and the environment for her daughter was not very good. And family, it was really common back then for family to help each other, take care of each other. And so because of Norma's choices with being into sexual immorality, a lesbian, all these things she was doing, she wanted to just have fun, and she didn't want to have her children. She didn't want to marry. She had these children with 3 different men, and that was her choice. And just because somebody's doing that doesn't mean you should abort your child. She obviously I think she got into a situation with a married man, and on her last one. And so the answer definitely was not to abort and kill the child, but to clean up her life. And it looks like, from where I'm at in my reading, she continued to choose to live a really immoral life with no responsibility at all. And this is because you know, she chose this. So let's not take our choices and say we're for abortion because we make bad choices.